Dobre, preživjeli smo 100.
Preživjeli smo 100 epizodu.
Što bi rekao Orwell, ušli smo u sobu 101.
101, da, sad smo otvorili nov serijal u kom ćemo morati brojimo do 200. Aj sad, da ne prejudiciramo, Bog te pita šta će biti do tada. Ja im sam...
Pita smo mi 100.
100 smo odradili, tako izgledamo kao da smo 100, a da pitam sam zašto ovaj pištolj okrenut
prema tebi?
Ka meni. Ko je to navistio? A malo, da, u kameru. Nek udara u snimateljku.
Da, ali evo je zakočen sve.
Da. U svakom slučaju, mi idemo sa 101. stripovedačem danas. Imamo nekoliko zanimljivih rubrika, jednog važnog gosta i to je sve što treba znati za početak. Idemo malo na...
Lepo si to sve i rekao i uveo nas u stripovedač 101. Tu su predmeti.
Idemo prvo da vidimo šta je današnja vest. A vest je da sam ja dokan čovjek i onda idem tako po netu i tražim priča o stripovima. I onda sam naišao na Spajdermena u malo drugačijem fazonu. Dakle, Spajdermen koji je spojen sa tradicionalnom japanskim zanatom rezanje drveta, razbarenja drveta, koji se zove ukiyo-e, su simbolom kulture Edo perioda. Postoji jedan sajt koji ćemo pokazati sada.
To nije strip, znači?
Nije strip, ovo su slike. Ovo su slike koje su urađene kao Spajdermen rađen u japanskoj...
To je duborez.
Tako je. Fazona duboreza, odlično izgleda i sad kao što vidite već na vašim ekranima, ukiyo.work.com se zove sajt, stavit ćemo ga dole, prosto da možete pogledate. Komercijalna je stvar, nije ovo potreba da reklamiramo pola priče iz Japana, nije ni važno, ne znam da će i kod vas da stigne do toga, ali smo htjeli da pokažemo kako Japanci u stvari vide jednog bilog američkog superheroja.
Jedna varijacija stripa, kroz tradicionalno.
Tako je, i to ste nekad verovatno vidjeli po netu i možda nekad i uživo čuvene talase i razne neke motive, trešnjev cvet, drvo i tako dalje, samuraje u ovom fazonu rađene, međutim Spajderman izgleda vrlo simpatično.
Spajderman na talasu na dasci.
I drži trešnjev cvet i peva, kako i da ona stvar, to, u svakom slučaju, pogledajte malo, jako zanimljivo, prošetajte tim sajtom, nagledat ćete se lepih strip prizora, ne samo Spajdermana, moram da kažem, a mi idemo dalje. Treba da najavimo jednog gosta, a nećemo da kažemo ko je, kako se to radi.
Pa, ništa, reći ćemo da smo imali čast da porazgovaramo s jednim velikim imenom svetske književnosti, ali čovekom koji je u stvari bio odgovoran za strip koji se zove Opskurni gradovi.
My interest for comics is directly related to childhood. I was born in Paris, but I grew up in Belgium, and comics were very, very important there. And I remember reading Tintin very early. Maybe when I was 4, 5, or 6, I remember still some images really, really strongly, and I continued year after year during my childhood and my adolescence to read Tintin because there are different levels, and so you can discover new things. And when I was a young man, a student, I decided, I studied literature and philosophy, but I decided to make my thesis about Tintin, which was very rare at that time because comics were not considered seriously in French university. But my master, Roland Barthes, he was very open-minded, and I wrote an essay about the jewels of Bianca Castafiore, Les Bijoux de la Castafiore, a close reading of this book. At that time, I met Herge. I made some interviews with him, and I continued through the years. And finally, I made a biography of Herge, different documentaries about him. The second door to enter in the comics world was also related to my childhood, because when I was 12, I was in a school in Brussels where I met a young man, would draw as much as possible. His name was, and is still, Fransoa Šojtenom. And Francois and we became very early friends. We had some common tastes. We then decided to create a small newspaper at school, and he was drawing, I was writing. We were printing together with difficult techniques of the time. We even sold it.
It was
A few
do it
copies.
yourself.
Do it yourself. Yes, some other boys were giving some text or some images, but mainly we did everything by ourselves. And also we were the two students of his father, Robert Šojtenom, who was an architect, a famous architect, but also fascinated by painting, art. Great art, not comics. And so very often on Saturday afternoon we visited an exhibition, and on Sunday morning in his studio, architectural studio, we were painting in reference to the exhibition that we saw. Francois was very good, because since he was a small kid, since 3, 4, 5 years old, he drew under the direction of his father. I was passionate, but not as talented. So there were two students. One was very good, and the second one was not so bad, let's say. But this relation with pictures, even if I continued more in the writing way, this relation with pictures was very important, because I am not, for what we have done together, the book of the obscure cities, I am not just a script writer, and he is not just the artist. We are building something together in a real complicity, friendship and proximity. So we discuss the story, the characters, the cities. We discuss together. We discuss the scenery, the layout of the pages. And this is a very important part of our work. So it's related to our complicity. When we were just children, we didn't mean at that time that we would build something together. We were just good friends, and we worked pleasantly together. But when we were a little older and we met again, we decided to create one book, and then it was well received, and it was a pleasure. And finally, we have created maybe 15 or 20 books. What is the most challenging is to have words and images really fitting together. And we have to invent different methods in each collaboration. So I worked with different artists. The main collaboration is with Fransoa Šojtenom, but I worked with Frédéric Boilet, Aurélia Orita, Alain Goffin, Anne Balthus, and a photographer, Marie-Françoise Plissard, for some photographic narrations. And each time I try to find a new way to collaborate, a new method. You cannot say, I have my method, or I have a script, and I will give it to somebody, and you have just to draw it well. So I have to adapt to the personality. I have to adapt to the graphic visual universe. And this is the most challenging, because I've written many books just as an author, so I can write essays or biographies or even novels when I was young. And so this is a certain type of work. I'm responsible for everything. But in a collaboration, it's like for theater or for opera or for movies or for television. The real deal, the real complementarity is the main major subject for me. And also, I like to work with people who are close to me. So we develop frequently a real friendship, and we discuss a lot together, and we promote the book together. So it's not two separate things, one people writing, one people drawing. I don't like this idea. And I never have an idea of a story before discussing with an artist. So it's very specific. And the chance is also the diversity. Because when you work with different people, you will work in different directions. For example, with Fransoa Šojtenom, it's more an imaginary world. But when I work with Aurélia Rita or Frédéric Boilet, it's very contemporary, related to reality. So totally different type of stories. And I like this diversity. I haven't produced so many books. I would say maximum 30 or something like that, which is not a lot. But I also wrote about comics and became more and more involved in the comprehension of this medium, the history of comics. And so this is a very specific figure, because you have people creating a lot of scripts, and you have people drawing a lot of books, but I had my own way, not in the quantity. We hadn't a very precise idea at that time. Francois was fascinated by architecture. We both grew up in Brussels, and then I went to Paris. We were interested in architecture, in cities. I loved fantastic literature, but very different things. So it can be Kafka or Borges or Italo Calvino, or many different authors. And we tried to make a book together. I had read the first short stories of Francois in heavy metal, Metal Hurlant. And I saw the themes that interested him in the beginning. So his work with his brother, Luc, and another friend, Claude Renard. And I tried to bring something very specific for his art. And it didn't succeed immediately. We had to discuss during 6 months or 8 months before finding the first good idea, which excited us both. And then we proposed a project to an important magazine, which was À Suivre. À Suivre was, I would say, promoting a sort of novels in comics. We didn't speak of graphic novel at that time, beginning of the 80s, but with Hugo Pratt or Corto Maltese, with Tardy, there was this idea of long stories with important themes. So I really wanted to go to À Suivre. It was a different spirit. Metal Hurlant was more rock and roll, more graphical experience. À Suivre was, yes, in a way more literary, probably. And I came from literature. And so the story was appreciated. The first book, which came 1 year later, was also appreciated. We had begun at that time a second story, La Fièvre du Rubicon, and this second story happens in the same universe, not in the same city, not with the same character. We didn't want to be prisoner of continuity. We wanted to make different experiences, but to situate things in the same universe. At that moment, we found the title, The Obscure Cities, Les Cités Obscures. And Les Cités Obscures gives a real unity to very different books. Certain books are really in comics form. Some are more text and illustrations. Some can go in other directions, like a travel guide in the obscure cities, a newspaper, some short movies, exhibitions. Everything belongs to the obscure cities. Each book is independent, but each book is connected to the other ones. So you can take the first book of the series or the fifth book of the series. It works as a story, as a whole story. So if you read La Fièvre de Vicande or The Tower, you can, I hope, enjoy it as a story. If you read more books, you will see that some characters, some cities, some details are referring to other books. But one book can be read separately, and we don't know how long it will continue, but there will never be the final ending book solving every question. No, you have it's open in a way. It's well built, but it's open. So some readers, they hope probably to have the end of the puzzle, but I think that in a way it's infinite, and of course the reader has a very important role. So some people, they want to know exactly, but what is the meaning of the end of the tower and what will happen? Okay, we have given you a story, but you have to give also something and to believe in your personal interpretation. So don't ask me what's the final meaning of the cubic structure in Rubicon. No, you read it, you enjoy it or not, but you will have your personal idea about the signification of the whole thing. Of course, we were also inspired by movies, by literature, by architecture, and so on. But we believe very much in the specificity of comics. And this is always an obsession to me, that we have such a freedom with graphic novels and comics. We can imagine a city, we can imagine a strange world, and it doesn't cost a lot. It costs a lot of time, of course, for the artist, also for me, but it's not expensive. I always remember that we met some years ago, many years ago, Terry Gilliam. We admire him a lot, and he had read our book, The Tower. I said, I would really like to make an adaptation, but it's too expensive for me. And then we said, okay, if it's too expensive for Terry Gilliam, then it's probably better to keep it as a graphic novel. Now we have different new techniques for new generation, and some authors can go from the comics to the movies. It's maybe easier, but it's not better to have done a film. It's something else. It's another experience. The freedom in comics is that if you have a certain audience and if your publisher trusts you, you can experiment a lot. And when you are doing movies like theater, play, opera, architecture, everything, you need to convince many, many people because you need a lot of money. And in comics, it's not totally necessary. The main question for us is to be free and to do the books that we want to do. This is, of course, the most important, not to think of a worldwide success. Okay, if it comes, it's great, but we are happy with our type of success, and we prefer sometimes to do strange books like The Return of Captain Nemo, for example, which is not really a graphic novel. It's something a little different, but we enjoyed it, and Francois enjoys also this type of free drawing. Jules Verne is a character of some of our books. And so we told in a book, or he tells that he visited the world of the obscure cities and find there some inspiration. Of course, we visited a lot of Jules Verne's book and found there a lot of inspiration. So we play with the references. There is sort of complicity with the readers. Of course, he knows that we were influenced by Jules Verne and not Jules Verne was influenced by us, but it's more funny to tell it this way. And we took his character of Captain Nemo. Normally is dead at the end of L'Île Mystérieuse, Mysterious Island. At the end, he's dead. But we thought that he didn't die at that moment, and he has a new life, and we try to tell. So it's not an adaptation. Mm-hmm. We don't like so much the idea of an adaptation. We prefer to continue in our style something, and of course it's also an homage. And maybe some readers, they see, the Jules Verne's novel is too big, too old. They just know the title or the theme. And maybe after reading our books, they would say, I will look at Jules Verne and read it. So it can also be helpful in that way. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, my culture in comics was really related to French and Belgian comics. Through the years, I discovered more and more, and I was interested in American comics, of course, in Japanese mangas, but also in the early comics, Tub Fair, Winsor Mackey, and other authors. And I became a sort of specialist. Some people, they know much more because I do different things. But okay, I know certain things about comics. I met a lot of authors. I'm good friend of people like Lorenzo Mattotti, Art Spiegelman, Chris Ware, many others. When I was younger, I met Will Eisner, for example. I know little Otomo. I worked with Jiro Taniguchi, made a dialogue book. So at a certain moment, in this very prestigious place in France, which is Collège de France, I was invited for 1 year to speak about the specificity of comics language. It was a great honor. It was also a great pleasure. It made a great pleasure for my mother because when I was young, she said, you should be a professor. It's prestigious, not just write bande dessinée. And so a few weeks before she died, she knew that I was professor for 1 year in Collège de France. And what is great also is that I had total freedom. I invited a lot of other people to participate to this cycles, and everything is possible to see on YouTube. So it's not just for the people who were there in this space, but also, of course, it's in French, but probably can add subtitles. And I showed a lot of images. It's my vision of comic art, but I think that it helps to enlarge the vision of the medium. Some people think that comics are just for children, or comics are just for laugh. Some people like only one tradition. I tried to open the field and to see so many possibilities. Now, so many artistic possibilities, so many literary possibilities, and so many new styles and new subjects, even very serious matters, non-fiction comics, and so on. So I tried to give an idea. And recently I published a book which is called Dictionnaire amoureux de la bande dessinée. So let's say a personal dictionary of comics, and I try to share my vision, but of course I know, and I'm happy to know that there are many other way to approach comics, and some people may say, "Oh, why is he speaking so longly about this author and he forgot this one?" I didn't forget it, but it was a personal dictionary amoureux, or dictionary in love with comics. So not all of them, but in different fields, because I'm very eclectic. Herge was the beginning for me. But of course, it's not the end. I'm not a Tintin fan, just obsessed by old comics. For example, here we have an exhibition about situation of women. When I began in the comics world, it was art practices by men. And you hadn't a lot of female creators, and their situation was a little difficult. Now, we have plenty of female artists in the comics world, and it changed a lot, and it changed also the themes, but the audience, and this is a great thing. So the evolution of comics has some very positive aspects. I'm not a nostalgic. I don't think that there was a golden age and everything was so good and Mandrake and so. No, I don't feel that way. I think that comics are still very creative in many countries, and through internet, through the festivals, we can discover many things. Through my books, I was lucky enough to travel through the world and discover our books in China or in Argentina or here in Serbia. It's great pleasure. And we discover comics from other traditions. Of course, now the production is so big. It's incredible. So many books are published that even if you are a sort of specialist, you cannot know everything. When we began in France, approximately 300 books were published each year in comics field. Now is something like 7,000-8,000. So when there were 300 books, every new author was able to be discovered, at least in the bookshops. And we had magazines, and magazines helped a lot because we were in the same magazine than Hugo Pratt or Tardy or other famous artists. And so people say, "Oh, who are those two guys, Scott and Peters?" But they didn't buy the magazine for us, but they discovered it because they wanted to know the new Corto Maltese. But now we have almost no more magazines, and so we have books, but you cannot buy every book, you cannot read every book, you cannot even have a look at every book, and so it's much more difficult for young artists to make a living with it and to be discovered by the audience. This is a major concern in France. Of course, in your country, I think the situation is very different because you don't have the same type of large market. We have a mass market. Japan has a mass market. The United States have a mass market, and France, Belgium has a mass market. In other countries, it's probably more difficult for the artist. I think that Herge believed very much in the possibilities of the language of comics when nobody cared about it. So in the 30s, he developed his work in black and white. In the 40s and 50s, he developed it in color, and it was well known. His art was progressing book after book. He was a very good narrator. He was a very good writer. He had humor. He had a sense of adventure. He created incredible characters like Captain Haddock, Professor Tournesol, Bianca Castafiore. So many talents in one single person at a moment when there were not so many comics. And so people of different generations loved it, wanted to share it with their children or grandchildren. And so the work of Herge helped to promote the art of comics, to give the desire to other artists in different styles to continue in comics. Herge was able to develop a story for children with a war question, like Le Lotus Bleu, with the war between China and Japan, to take it, to create it seriously, to develop this incredible and beautiful friendship between Tintin and the young Chinese boy Chang. Herge himself had a real Chang in its life. Everything in his life entered in the story. He didn't think that it was just for kids. He wanted to give stories which were strong and important for him, but with a lot of humor, a lot of fantasy, a perfect drawing for telling this type of story. He is unique, but his historical situation is unique also, because now you cannot imagine something like a new Tintin because you have so many sources for kids, for example, with video games and internet and television and comics, so many things that we cannot hope to have a new hero as famous as Tintin and as influential as Tintin was. So I worked a lot about his work. Yes, you say Tintin and the World of Herge, but later the biography Herge, Son of Tintin, which is, I think, the major work I have done. And I still am in love with his work. Herge is a complicated person, but I like also complicated persons. So he's not totally clean in a modern point of view. You can consider some aspect of his political views or on other subjects you can criticize him. But I still think that it's a monument. But we have other monuments. Little Nemo in Slumberland by Winsor McCay is a monument. Asterix by Goscinny and Uderzo is a monument. And so many, Otomo with Akira, and so many important things. But I think for France and Belgium, without Herge, things would have been very different.
U potrazi za nekim od najboljih mangi u istoriji došao sam do jedne mange koja, nažalost, nije još prevedena kod nas. Nadam se da hoće biti. U pitanju je Erased, psihološki thriller manga autora Kei Sanbeja. Glavni lik je Satoru Fujinuma, mladić sa sposobnošću vraćanja u prošlost, kako bi sprečio tragedije. Njegova moć se zove Revival, obično ga vraća nekoliko minuta unazad, ali zbog onog događaja zbog kog se zapetljava radnja u ovoj mangi, on se vraća zapravo 18 godina u prošlost. Radnja se fokusira na seriju otmica i ubistava dece koja Satoru pokušava da spreči, a važan deo te priče je njegovo detinjstvo i odnos sa drugovima iz razreda, posebno sa Kajo Hinazuki. Ova manga je posebna između ostalog i po tome što istražuje teme traume, usamljenosti, pa onda nasilja među decom i mladima, nasilja u porodici, želje za iskupljenjem i tako dalje. Ključni element ove mange je zapravo napetost. A napetost se gradi kroz tu misteriju, jer čitaoci, mi svi koji čitamo tu mangu zajednički pokušavamo da dođemo do odgovora ko je zapravo ubica, odnosno koji je njegov identitet. Manga je posebno cenjena zbog emotivne dubine koju donosi i zbog jako dobrog portretisanja dece i njihovih karaktera. I po tome možda najbolja od svega što sam pročitao do sada u stripovima. Treba reći samo za kraj da je Erased psihološki thriller koji je dobio i svoju anime adaptaciju, koja je dosta dobra i koja je proširila ovaj svet fanova ove priče na do neslućenih širina i visina. Prosto Kei Sanbeja je stvorio jedan jako, jako dobar svet koji treba da pratite i koji treba da čitate. Naći ćete ga online, obećavam, samo probajte da ga ukucate.
Sad, pošto mi nismo muzička emisija, nismo DJ-evi, ako imamo ove slušalice, ne možemo da ispunjavamo muzičke želje, bilo bi to sigurno zanimljivo kad bi vas pitali šta hoćete, ali možemo da ispunimo stripaške želje.
Jeste, to je istina.
To ćemo sad uraditi.
U jednoj od epizoda pitali smo vas da li biste volili neke od stripova da obradimo u Stripovedaču. Jedan od naših gledalaca se javio i rekao, bilo bi lepo da pogledate strip ili potražite strip koji se zove Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. To je strip iz 2023. godine, prilično nov. Radio ga je Patrik Horvat i u pitanju je neka vrsta horora, trilera. Da, i pratimo jednu ekipu antropomorfnih životinja koje treba da pronađu ubicu i sve je prošlo nekom vrstom misterije, međutim crtež je ovde ono što je ključno i u narednih 2,5 minuta čućete u stvari zašto je strip zanimljiv, dobar i zašto ga treba potražiti.
Imaš osmeh na licu, znači dopao ti se strip.
Dopao mi se strip,
to je najbitnije. Da.
Svaka čast. Ovo je priča koja nas podsjeća da izgled često vara. Danas istražujemo svet koji na prvi pogled deluje kao najlepša slikovnica iz vašeg detinjstva, ali se brzo pretvara u najgoru noćnu moru. Reč je o stripu Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees autora Patrika Horvata. Zamislite gradić Woodstock. To je mesto gde su ulice uvek čiste, komšije ljubazne, a stanovnici simpatične antropomorfne životinje. U centru svega je Samanta, smirena i pedantna medvedica koja drži lokalnu gvožđeru. Samanta je srce zajednice, ali ona krije tajnu koja bi sledila krv u žilama svakom stanovniku Woodstocka. Naša simpatična medvedica je zapravo serijski ubica. Ono što ovaj strip čini briljantnim nije samo šok faktor, već neverovatan kontrast. Autor koristi vizualni stil koji neodoljivo podsjeća na klasične dečije knjige, tople boje, meke linije i likove koji izgledaju kao da su ispali iz najnežnijeg crtanog filma. Međutim, unutar tih okvira on ispisuje mračan, hladan i psihološki dubok triler. Zaplet se zaoštrava kada u gradić stiže neko ko ne igra po Samantinim pravilima. Pojavljuje se drugi ubica, neko ko ostavlja haos tamo gde Samanta ostavlja red. Gledati medvedicu kako pokušava da balansira između uloge uzorne građanke i hladnokrvnog predatora koji brani svoju teritoriju, iskustvo je koje vas drže prikovanim za svaku stranicu. Ovo je priča o prirodi zla koja se krije iza uredno počišanih živica i ljubaznih pozdrava. Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees nas primorava da se zapitamo koliko zaista poznajemo ljude ili u ovom slučaju životinje sa kojima delimo svakodnevnicu. Ako tražite nešto što će vas istovremeno očarati svojom lepotom i prestraviti svojom brutalnošću, ne tražite dalje. Samo se pripremite. Posle ovog stripa svaki osmeh komšije delovaće vam za mrvicu sumnjivije.
Evo jednog stripa koji na realan način opisuje šta znači to sloboda. To je sad onako možda malo opšta reč, ali verujte mi preko 400 strana možemo da se uverimo zašto je u stvari sloboda možda i najbitnija stvar u našem životu. No, ovo je Guy Delisle, strip koji se zove Hostage ili Talac. Ja imam originalno američko izdanje. Kod nas ovaj album nije izašao, mada Guy Delisle znamo već kroz naslove Shenzhen, Pyongyang, Jerusalim i tako dalje. U ovom jako zanimljivom stripu vraćamo se u sredinu 90. godina, gde je Kristof Andre, glavni junak, svoju priču ispričao na magnetofon upravo Gaju Delileu, koji je opet ovu priču izneo u formi stripa. Zaista sjajan strip, priča o Kristofu Andreu, koji je bio jedan od, da kažem, zaposlenih i ljudi koji su bili aktivni u misiji Lekari bez granica, koji jednog dana biva kidnapovan u Čečeniji i vezan u jednoj sobi za radijator. I to je onako jedna čitava premisa ovih 400 i nešto strana. Dakle, zaista klaustrofobično, jako naporno za čitanje i iako je pojednostavljeno, mi na mnogim stranicama vidimo manje više isti kadar. To je opet bio veliki izazov za Dalila da ne gubi oštrinu, fokus i da nam ne bude dosadno i uopšte nam nije dosadno. Dakle, on je napravio u stvari, možda namerno i slučajno, filmski ugođaj, kao neki malo jači storyboard, mislim jači i konkretniji, i kroz ove stranice pitamo se i mi kako bi reagovali u ovoj situaciji. Dakle, čudna je priča, u stvari, ne kako je Kristof došao u tu sobu s kojom se na kraju nekako i srodio pre nego što je video svetlo slobode, nego kako je razmišljao, kako je donao neke zaključke o kojima pre nije razmišljao, koji nisu bili u njegovoj glavi. Tako da, osim jednostavnog crteža, možda i najjednostavnijeg do sada koji sam video kada pričamo o ovom strip autoru, super je i to kako on osvetljavao ovaj naslov. Dakle, mi, ako je Kristof u mraku, to je jako, jako taman kadar i imamo plastičnu atmosferu, dakle, tog njegovog stanja i beznađa, da kažem, jer bukvalno je sateran u jedan ćošak bez ikakve logike, samo zato što je radio za neku drugu stranu. Protok vremena je opet problematičan zato što je vezan za 4 zida i mislim da je to razlog zašto se ovaj strip čita polako, temeljno, možda je to i, kažem, bila je sama ideja Dalila da se tako pristupi ovom zaista ozbiljnom stripu. Ja ga toplo preporučujem, čita se danima, može se vrati u stvari opet na neke stare stranice, jer koliko god da je delovao i da deluje, jednostavno nešto će vam promaći u ovom, dakle, sudbinskom okretu jednog života. Evo, Brko, ovo ovde ti je Majer Fatal.
Aha.
I on je napunio pre nekoliko nedelja 50.
Dobro izgleda, dobro se da. Mislim, ja sam napunio pre nekoliko nedelja 50 godina i ne držao se tako dobro.
Dobro se, ali dobro, to si ti Brko, vidiš. To je, znači, ideja u rok tužbe. Da se vratimo temi, za kraj Stripovedača 101, dakle, 50 godina ove nezaboravne epizode Moebiusa Hermetičkog garaža. Ja u rukama držim ovo retko izdanje Čarobne šume. Pre, recimo, nekih 7-8 godina se ovo pojavilo i u velikom formatu smo doživjeli jedan najkultnijih epizoda koje su bile prekretnica na stranu.
Pravi format da se čita taj strip.
Da.
Ne vredi drugačije.
1976. Hermetic Garage, jedan strip koji u stvari daje novi život. Ne samo ovaj strip, ali on je zakucao u stvari sliku gde Žan Žiro u stvari postaje Moebius, postaje veći od života i postaje u stvari načelnik modernog, savremenog.
Postmodernog čak.
Da, odlepljuje se recimo od Blueberrya i od neke šture strip forme, naravno na koje je učio, i pravi ovaj zaista nezaboravan strip koji ne može u stvari da se opiše šta je, to je samo Hermetička garaža, Majer Fatal, u stvari šta je ono što se dešava iza jednih vrata u podzemnoj železnici.
Zato sam i rekao da me ovaj strip podsjeća najviše na postmodernu i na postmodernistički način pripovedanja, zato što je Žiro u tom momentu kada je stvarao Hermetičku garažu nije imao neki koncizan scenariju, bar je tako govorio u svojim intervjuima, da nikakav scenarij nije imao. On je stvarao epizodu po epizodu, čini mi se čak pomalo i na osjećaj.
Osjećaj i na ono što je recimo jeo.
Da, dobro, da.
To je njegovo još meksičko.
Ozbiljna tripčina. Nema nikakvo konvencionalno pripovedanje, nije u pitanju, nećete shvatiti, nije poenta da shvatite neki dramski zaplet, poenta je da uđete u svet koje je Žiro stvorio kroz ovog jednog junaka.
Upravo to, Brko, negde sam pročitao kovanicu zove strip kao džepni univerzum. To je stvarno džepni univerzum,
da.
jer on je ceo svoj univerzum u mojoj fatalu u Hermetičkoj garaži stavio na ovih nekoliko desetina strana, u neku kap malu koja spada u okean, taj okean je u stvari svemir i sad možemo da širimo priču, ali upravo se to vidi da on, pošto nije imao neki scenario. Znači,
ništa tada nije postavljeno. Ja kažem, on je to radio na osjećaj.
Toga su se držali mnogi tada u 70. godina, pogotovo tim psihodeličnim, postpsihodeličnim fazama, recimo, tu možemo da vidimo, to možemo da vidimo i kod Žodorovskog, to možemo da vidimo i kroz ranog Manaru, možemo da vidimo i kroz filmove, naravno, tako da, eto, i on koji, znaš, krene u neku kao strukturu priče i to samo mutira i širi se i kroz sve te, u stvari, dimenzije i vrata prolazi jedan lik, a to je naš Majer Fatal.
Tako je, treba reći samo da je ovo Žirova ili Moebiusova, to je pik, Moebiusova, izvinjava se, to je pik njegovog stvaralaštva, iz nekoliko razloga. Prvo crtež je najzreliji u čitavoj njegovoj karijeri, način na koji je radio arhitekturu, način na koji je radio likove, pejzaže, način na koji je bojio svoje slike, svoje table, sve to je negde na vrhuncu njegove veštine kao likovnog stvaralaca. I bez obzira na to što je napravio potpuni otklon od dramskog pripovedanja kako smo videli u Blueberry i nekim drugim ranijim radovima koje je radio, ovde se jednostavno prepustio nekoj umetničkoj intuiciji i iz njega izašlo zaista su izašle božanstvene scene koje možete posmatrati tablu po tablu i diviti se.
Ovde, naravno, imamo i lep predgovor Moebiusa, da on kaže da se on kao klinac divio, to je ta generacija istraživačima, avanturama, znaš.
Oni su bili veliki idoli.
Da, to je ono što će kasnije ta njegova generacija napraviti u Hollywoodu, to je Indiana Jones. On je ovde otišao još korak dalje u tom istraživanju nesvesnog i posvesnog i imamo sjajan pogovor Milana Jovanovića iz Stalkera. Meni ovaj format baš fenomenalan, jer toliko se vidi moć crteža. Ja mislim da bi mogao da čitam i duplo veći format Moebiusa.
Sigurno da, možda gledaš.
Te 1992. godine, bitna godina kada se Moebius, u stvari, kada se ova epizoda pojavljuje u prvom Tronu, časopisu Tron, jedan deo, i tu se oduševljam, dakle, to je ono manji format, crno-belo, ali potpuno neko ludilo, znači uz tu neku muziku koju sam slušao, otkrio Moebiusa, znači to je tad bilo staro, možda nekih, ajde kažemo, 20-ak, ne još 20-ak godina.
Da, ali se sazrelo.
Da, ali bilo je svežije, naravno, a 1992. godine pojavljaju se i čuveni naš časopis Dvobroj gradac, koji je bio posvećen Moebiusu i tu su, pored naravno nekih standardnih crteža, impresija, prikazani i neki njegovi važni intervjui, jedan deo intervjua i njegovih izjava, naravno, stavljanje ovoj pedagog. Tako da je to jedno jako bitno kapitalno izdanje, bitan naravno strip, koji je posle proširio mnoge vidike, ne samo u Moebiusu. Naravno, tu i Žodorovski, bonusno, ali to je moralo tako se se poznaju. Kreću da rade na kultnoj priči o Dini, bla, na kraju to ništa, ali oni prave svoj dragulj u obliku inkela.
Ja i dalje čekam da neko objavi taj knjigu snimanja.
Oni prave svoj dragulj u obliku inkela, zaista, eto, to je njihova nadogradnja, to prijateljstva, ali sve to u stvari ide iz ovih vrata, iz ove hermetičke garaže.
Moguće da je to strip koji je prvi put pokazao da ne moraš imati jasnu dramsku podlošku, odnosno to, znaš, kao puška koja se pojavi u prvom činu mora da opali do kraja i tako dalje. Dakle, da može da se radi nešto u potpuno slobodnoj strukturi, da se kreira strip koji izgleda kao da je svestan sebe, kao da je svestan sopstvenog postojanja i da to bude kao umetnički relevantno u svetu stripa. To je velika stvar. Da tu menjaš potpuno žanrove.
Da, koliko on stihijski radio, tu se vidi da, znači, ti iz nekog westerna uđeš u neki nadrealizam, iz nadrealizma uđeš u neku parodiju, iz neke parodije uđeš u neki superherojski moment.
Da.
Su neki potpuno astečki, onako, superherojski. Da, pa ne da ste vidimo više nekim drugim. Ali sve ono, u stvari, što je taj kraj 70-ih i dona, na kraju krajeva, tu se godinu dana kasnije dolazi punk, pa dolazi novi talas, pa svi oni su prigrali strip, i autori, i muzičari, mnogi su radili omote.
Fanzine.
Ovo sam Grijer, recimo, to je jedan iz ekipe isto, koji je isto stihijski radio i pod impresijom. Tako da, Moebius se, naravno, ovde potpuno prepušta toj čistoj liniji, boj isto kako mu se bukvalno ćefne, mi idemo potpuno onako prelaze, vidiš kako on to potpuno ti neki prelazi neočekivani, lepi, atmosferični, a sad za priču naravno to svako može.
To nije strip koji se lako čita, tako je, to nije strip koji se lako čita, ali je to strip u kojem se jako lako uživa, dakle svaka tabla je posebno malo umetničko delo i stvarno treba tako i da ga posmatrate, a vi ćete u priči pronaći ono što vi mislite da...
Da, i sam kraj, neću otkriti kraj, ali sam kraj je urađen u tom minijaturnom crno-belom štimungu sa par nekih boja, tako da je to jedna lepa krug i zaista čudna priča koja, kažem, kad sam se prvi put susreo s njom, ništa mi nije bio jasno, možda nije mi sada jasno, kao onaj deo u Odiseji Kubrickovi kad on putuje pred kraj, pa mi imamo utisak da sam u stvari kontakt sa nekim uzvišenim bićima koja su nevidljiva, tako da je Moebius nešto tu video, osetio i uspešno, što je jako teško preneo na...
Dakle, Moebiusova Hermetička garaža, kao i ja, napunila 50 godina ove godine. Za razliku od mene, ona zaslužuje da bude u muzeju 9. umetnosti. Ja mogu rekao špajzu za jedno 50 godina, a još puno moram da jedem pasulja. No, u svakom slučaju, Hermetička garaža jeste jedan od onih stripova koji su prekretnice za mnoge autore, odnosno prekretnici s koje su mnogi autori kasnije crpili svoje inspiracije, ne samo strip autori, nego filmadžije, moda, arhitektura i tako dalje. Ozbiljan strip za ozbiljne ljubitelje 9. umetnosti.
Eto, sa ovom Hermetičkom garažom mi zatvorimo vrata pomenute sobe 101, eto, to se sad namestilo. Čitajte i Orwella, naravno on je evergreen, pogotovo danas, i uvek će biti još bolji.
Biće još gorih vremena od ovih vremena.
Pronaćete neku svoju hermetičku garažu, neki svoj džepni univerzum i naravno nemojte da izostavite Moebiusa u svom životu, to je jako bitno. To je kao so.
Čitajte stripove i vidimo se za koju nedelju.
Ćao.
Ćao.